So the first thing that catches my eye about this game is that it's from the makers of Ninja Gaiden and Dead or Alive, two of my favorite gaming franchises of all time, which sadly hasn't been doing so well in recent years. Most notably Dead or Alive 6 with its nearly $2,000 worth of additional content. With that much resource devoted towards DLC, you can see where the company has set its priorities. And then there's Ninja Gaiden, which fares a little better, but has lost its edge since Itagaki's departure in my opinion. Fortunately, Wanted Dead doesn't come from that same company. Instead, it was developed by SOLEIL, a company made from ex-members of Team Ninja. So hearing that, I was quick to assume this game is probably going to be amazing. Well, I've played through the game, and now that I'm sitting here writing this review, I can say that I'm relieved, but a little disappointed. There's a lot of things Wanted Dead does well. The combat is fun, and its overall presentation harkens back to the old days of PS2 era gaming. When it works, it works. And when the game finds its groove, you'd think you were looking at a spiritual successor to Ninja Gaiden. Unfortunately, poor gameplay design holds back Wanted Dead from its true potential. The game would have turned out so much better had it left out this one gameplay mechanic. What am I referring to? Take one guess. Alright, so I'm just gonna go right ahead and say what I hate about this game. The shooting. If you look up Wanted Dead, it's described as a hybrid hack-and-slash third-person shooter. Early gameplay footage made the two mechanics look great in action, but in practice, it performs like a game that's still in beta. And I blame that solely on the third-person shooting. It just doesn't work with the melee combat and feels more like something that was tacked on at the very last minute. Anytime you go over the shoulder, it throws everything off. You don't know where you are, what you're aiming at. It takes you a while to figure out your bearings, and by that time, you've lost half your life. It's not even worth it. As a consequence, the game doesn't know what it wants to be. You can tell the developers were torn between making a hack-and-slash action game or a third-person shooter. Why not just make both? Well, here's the problem. The two mechanics just don't gel well together in my opinion. There's no synergy, the aiming feels clumsy, and each mechanic hinders the other more than it complements. The quick shot, however, works only because it's used more like a counterattack than an actual firearm. In addition to the third-person shooting, there's also an automatic cover system, which unfortunately doesn't work very well either. It's hard to determine which surface can be used as cover, so you'll find yourself unintentionally sticking to a wall when you didn't. The game is already chaotic enough as it is, so introducing a cover system does nothing but disrupt the flow of the action. I can probably think of one instance in the game where the cover system came in handy, but generally speaking, it doesn't work. Or at least not needed. The enemies are basically walking bullet sponges. Controller dead zone is massive when aiming, ammo is limited, and most of the time, enemies will rush you, leaving very little time for shooting. Honestly, you're better off just using your katana. Getting hit with gunfire hardly takes any damage, as opposed to physical attacks, which can kill you in 3 hits. So you start to wonder, what's even the point in shooting enemies? Weapons can be customized, which I will admit does help a tiny bit, but unfortunately, they don't become useful till much later in the game, which by that point you'll be well accustomed to your katana. Okay, so here's where Dead Wanted truly excels in my opinion. The combat is solid enough where I feel that if you left out the shooting entirely, it would actually be a better game. As a matter of fact, you could pretty much get by without ever firing off a shot other than your pistol. Hell, even the friggin' chainsaw does more damage than those pathetic weapons. Speaking of chainsaw, this thing is so OP, but that's what I love about it. And the censorship is a funny little touch, I have to say. If you play the game as a straight up hack and slash, then Wanted Dead is quite enjoyable. Granted, the combat can feel a little stiff in the beginning parts of the game. With limited moves and resources, you might resort to the horrible third-person shooting, which again I think should have been left out. But once more skills are unlocked through the skill tree, the combat really starts to pick up. That's because the skills you unlock are ones that you actually use in combat. For example, performing a lunge attack while running, or the ability to perform a finisher after cutting off an enemy limb. At first, you can only do this to enemies who are stunned, but once the severed limb ability is unlocked, the game gets really crazy. Remember the obliteration technique from Ninja Gaiden 2? Well, it's exactly like that. Not as bloody, but much more stylish. There's a total of 50 unique finishing moves, and man are they awesome. My only complaint is that I wish there was more blood shooting out of the stumps. Yeah, I know, I got problems. There's also a very useful bullet time move that stuns surrounding enemies. The result allows you to quickly finish off anyone caught in the blast. Very satisfying to say the least, and also pretty cool looking. For some reason, it sort of reminds me of those John Wick movies. There's also grenades you can throw, but I don't know. Their effectiveness is either hit or miss. I never really found myself relying too much on them. So, I mentioned earlier that the shooting in this game was useless other than the pistol. It can be used as a short-range attack and as part of a combo, but I think you're gonna find it more useful as a counter. Now, the game will let you parry enemy attacks with a well-timed counter, but there are unblockable attacks that can only be parried using the pistol. With that being said, I cannot stress how important it is to be able to parry in this game. It is crucial that you learn this technique, because some enemies can take you out in 3 hits. The game isn't necessarily hard, it's just that physical attacks take a ton of damage, and some enemies can be super cheap. I'm talking about those one-hit kills. But then again, you fight cheap with cheap. And that's basically how I played Wanted Dead. I just didn't shoot very much, or not at all. And because of that, the game works. As for performance, the game seems to run at 60 FPS on PS5. There's a few stutters here and there when certain enemies are introduced, but it really doesn't affect the gameplay much. Loading times are quick, and I only noticed 2 instances where the frame rate would drop during actual gameplay. Once during a big explosion, and another while performing a finishing move in a crowded room. Some textures took a second to load, but other than that, I found very few technical issues. Wanted Dead isn't necessarily the best looking game I've seen so far, and quite honestly, I think it could pass for a PS3 game. However, there is enough color and effects going on that makes the entire game interesting to look at. Explosions look great, and finishing moves are really well done. I mean, the amount of creativity is just jaw-dropping. Like, wow, this is some Hollywood stuff right here. Character models are slightly above average and don't really do much for the in-game cutscenes in my opinion. However, I did enjoy the anime cutscenes. They're used sparingly, but effective. Overall, I wasn't blown away by the look of the game, but I can't say I was disappointed either. It's not a bad looking game, but definitely not one to show off what current gen machines are capable of. So, who is this game really for? It's a hybrid hack and slash shooter, but works better without the shooting. So, is it for hack and slash fans? Perhaps. It's not for the mainstream market, that's for damn sure. The voice acting is too deadpan to be taken seriously. However, it borders on the so bad that it's almost good in a way. The supporting cast does a commendable job, but the main character, Hannah, makes me wonder if she was even trying.
You do understand that I will fucking kill you.
I do like the art direction. It has sort of like a cyberpunk thing going on, combined with a 90s retro feel. I wasn't a big fan of the music at first, but as the game went on, it started to grow on me. If you're looking for something with an extended replay value, Wanted Dead might not be for you. The game is very linear in its approach. Defeat enemies, make it through the level, defeat more enemies, and then fight a boss. There's a very nostalgic feel to the overall gameplay, reminiscent of games from the PS2, Dreamcast era. Kinda arcadey, but with a little bit of depth. Enemies can be difficult, and dying takes you all the way back to a previous checkpoint. There were a few frustrating parts, but that's only because I started using the third-person shooting. When you're back at HQ headquarters, there's many games you can play to pass the time. Ramen eating and karaoke singing is pretty much a rip-off from every rhythm-based game you've seen before. But hey, at least you'll be singing 99 Luftballons. There's also a shoot-'em-up game, which is, I don't know, meh. But I think the most addictive one of all is the crane game. Like, seriously, I couldn't stop playing this. None of these minigames alone is reason enough to play Wanted Dead, but collectively, as a whole, they all come together very nicely. The humor is there for the most part, and the combat is enticing enough that makes it worth playing through the game. Although you won't notice that at first because you'll be so frustrated with the third-person shooting and cover system. My advice is to make it to at least the second level. By that point, you would have gotten a handle on the controls, received a good amount of upgrades from the skill tree, and know how the parry system works. Try to use the third-person shooting sparingly, or not at all, and Wanted Dead might just become one of your favorite games. It's a very niche kind of game that will appeal to a very specific demographic. What do you call those people who are like obsessed with Japanese stuff? If that's you, then you'll totally eat this game up. It doesn't have that mass market appeal, unfortunately. I mean, this isn't GTA. Like, you're not gonna be killing any hookers in this game. But as a straight up old school hack and slash action game, it does the job very well. Wanted Dead on PlayStation 5 comes recommended. Now, if you want to see more games you can play on that shiny new PS5, then click the video on the screen right now. And if you really want to help me out, then do so by dropping a super thanks.